The frontier didn't forgive mistakes. Alira Vane learned that truth, the way most people learned fire, was hot, by touching it and bearing the scar. 3 days ago, she'd left what remained of Ashton Flats with $17, 2 canteens, and the ledger. The town hadn't burned exactly. Fire required something to consume, and Ashton Flats had already been eaten hollow by 2 years of drought that turned topsoil to powder and hope to dust. The school closed first, then the general store, then the church, though the preacher stayed another month, delivering sermons to empty pews before he finally packed his wagon and rolled east. By the time Alira locked the schoolhouse door for the last time, she was talking to ghosts. 23 families had lived in Ashton Flats when she'd arrived 4 years prior, young and convinced that education mattered, that children deserved better than their parents' hard luck. Now those families were scattered like dandelion seeds, blown to whatever ground might take them. She'd stayed longer than sense allowed. Stayed because leaving meant admitting defeat, and because she had nowhere particular to go. Stayed because the ledger hidden beneath her mattress felt like an anchor she couldn't lift. The day she finally walked away, the sky was the color of old bone. 3 days later, that same sky was trying to murder her. Alira's canteens had run dry yesterday afternoon. She'd rationed carefully, measuring each sip, but mathematics didn't negotiate with the sun. The frontier spread in every direction without feature or mercy, just grass burned brown and hills that shimmered with heat phantoms. No trees, no shade, no water. Her feet moved because stopping meant dying. Simple as that. The ledger stayed pressed against her ribs beneath her dress, the leather warm as skin. She'd stopped wondering if it was worth dying for. Worth was a luxury for people who had choices. She just kept walking. When the fence line appeared, she thought at first it was another phantom. But phantoms didn't cast shadows, and this fence did, thin rails of wood stretching east and west, marking territory in a place that seemed to deny human claim. Alira reached the fence and wrapped both hands around the top rail, holding herself upright. Her vision swam, the ground tilted. She had just enough consciousness left to think, "At least I tried." Then the earth came up to meet her, and everything went black. Rowan Mercer didn't usually ride the eastern fence line on Tuesdays. That was supposed to be Cal's job. The boy was 14 and needed responsibilities. But Cal had woken with a fever and Tessa insisted he stay in bed. So Rowan saddled his roan mare and rode out into the heat, checking posts and wire, looking for breaks that would let cattle wander. He saw the buzzards first, 4 of them, wheeling lazy circles against the white sky. Rowan's jaw tightened, probably a calf that got separated and died of heat exhaustion. It happened. The drought had lasted 18 months, long enough that Mercer Ranch was the only spread within 30 miles that still had water. Their wells ran deep, tapping aquifers that other ranchers couldn't reach. It made them wealthy. It also made them targets. Rowan spurred the mare toward the birds. He expected a dead animal. What he found was a woman. She lay crumpled against the fence like a discarded coat, face down in the dirt, arms splayed. One boot was tied together with wire. Her dress had been gray once, maybe, but was now the color of the dust it was caked with. Dark hair spilled across her shoulders, matted with grit. Rowan dismounted and knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her throat. The pulse was there, weak, thready, but present. Her skin was hot as a kettle. "Ma'am?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. He looked around, searching for some explanation. No horse, no wagon, no supplies except a single leather bag lying a few feet away. Rowan retrieved it, heavy, filled with something that shifted like papers, and looped it over his saddle horn. Then he returned to the woman and carefully rolled her onto her back. She was younger than he'd thought. Maybe 30, maybe less. Hard to tell with 3 days of exposure carved into her features. But her face had good bones beneath the sunburn and cracked lips. He noticed her hands, calloused, but not from ranch work. Different kind of calluses. Ink stains on 2 fingers. A schoolteacher, maybe. Or a clerk. Rowan lifted her as carefully as he could and draped her across the mare's withers. The horse sidestepped, nervous at the unfamiliar weight, but settled at his voice. He swung up behind the saddle and turned toward home, keeping one arm around the unconscious woman to hold her steady. The ride back took 40 minutes. The whole time, she didn't stir. Tessa Mercer was hanging laundry when her brother appeared with a half-dead woman on his horse. Jesus, Rowan. Found her at the eastern fence. Rowan dismounted and carefully lowered the woman into his arms. Get water and clean cloths. She's burning up. Tessa didn't waste time with questions. She dropped the sheet she'd been pinning and ran for the house. By the time Rowan carried the woman through the kitchen door, Tessa had a pallet made up in the spare room off the kitchen, the small room they used for sick hands or emergencies. Cal stood in the doorway, feverish himself but curious, until Tessa shooed him back to bed. Rowan laid the woman down and stepped back, suddenly aware that his presence wasn't needed for whatever came next. Tessa was already pressing a wet cloth to the woman's forehead, checking for breaks or wounds, efficient and steady. She say anything? Tessa asked without looking up. Unconscious the whole ride. How long you think she was out there? Days, judging by the condition she's in. Rowan pulled the leather bag from his shoulder and set it by the door. This was with her. Tessa glanced at it. Check for identification. I need to get her temperature down before she cooks her brain. Rowan picked up the bag and carried it to the kitchen table. He hesitated. Going through a stranger's belongings felt intrusive, but if there was information inside that could help her, he needed to know. He unbuckled the strap and opened the flap. Papers. The bag was stuffed with papers. He pulled them out carefully. Letters, receipts, contracts, all neatly organized, all dated and labeled in careful script. At the bottom of the bag, he found a ledger bound in cracked leather, the kind accountants used for tracking business. Rowan opened it. The first page was titled in neat handwriting, Ashton Flat School, Financial Records, September 1871. He flipped through pages of income and expenses, enrollment numbers, supply purchases, standard bookkeeping. But halfway through, the entries changed. The handwriting was the same, but the content shifted from mundane school business to something darker. Payment received from J. Cartwright, $50. Purpose: disciplinary matter forgotten. Payment received from Mayor's office, $75. Purpose: incident report destroyed. Payment received from Harrison family, $100. Purpose: complaint withdrawn. Rowan's jaw tightened as he read. Page after page of payments, bribes, hush money. And at the center of it all, one name repeated, Silas Reed, schoolmaster. The last entry was dated 3 months ago. Final payment received. School closing. Record sealed. SR relocated east to Milford Springs. Rowan closed the ledger slowly. Find anything? Tessa called from the next room. Yeah. Rowan's voice was flat. Found something. Elira woke to the smell of clean cotton and lamplight. For several seconds, she couldn't place where she was. Not the schoolhouse. Not the boarding room she'd rented in Ashton Flats. The ceiling above her was whitewashed wood, unfamiliar. The blanket covering her was heavy wool, rough but clean. Her throat felt like someone had scraped it with sandpaper. Easy. A woman's voice, calm and firm. Don't try to sit up yet. Elira turned her head. A woman sat in a chair beside the bed, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She held a cup of water. Small sips, the woman said, supporting Elira's head as she drank. You've been out for most of a day. Your body needs time. The water was cold and perfect. Elira took 3 small sips before the woman pulled the cup away. Where? Elira's voice cracked. She tried again. Where am I? Mercer Ranch. My brother found you collapsed at our eastern fence. You're lucky he rides that line. Most days he doesn't. The woman set the cup aside. I'm Tessa Mercer. You got a name? Elira. Her mind felt slow, struggling through fog. Elira Vane. Well, Miss Vane, you came about as close to dying as a person can without crossing over. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, malnutrition. Tessa's tone was matter-of-fact. No sympathy, but no judgment either. What were you doing out there with no horse, no supplies, and no sense? The question hung in the air. Elira's hand moved instinctively to her ribs, searching for the ledger. It wasn't there. Panic flashed through her. Looking for this? Tessa nodded toward the corner where the leather bag sat. It's all there. My brother looked through it. Had to, in case there was something that could help identify you. He knows what's in the ledger. Elira's throat tightened. I can explain. Not to me, you can't. That's between you and Rowan. Tessa stood, smoothing her skirt. For now, you rest. I'll bring broth in an hour. Your stomach can't handle anything heavier yet. She left before Elira could respond. Elira lay still, staring at the ceiling. Her body ached in ways she hadn't known were possible. But worse than the physical pain was the crushing weight of awareness. Someone knew. Someone had read the ledger. After months of carrying it alone, of deciding what to do with information that could destroy lives or save them, the choice was no longer entirely hers. She should be afraid. She should be planning her next move. Instead, exhausted beyond measure, she closed her eyes and fell back into darkness. Rowan waited until the next morning to talk to her. He knocked once on the doorframe before entering. The woman, Elira, was awake, propped against pillows, looking stronger than yesterday but still worn thin. Her eyes tracked him as he pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down, holding the ledger. You read it, she said. Not a question. I did. Rowan set the ledger on the edge of the bed. Want to tell me what I'm looking at? Elira's gaze dropped to the book. For a long moment, she didn't speak. When she did, her voice was quiet but steady. Ashton Flats had a schoolmaster named Silas Reed. Charming man, well-educated. Everyone loved him. Her jaw tightened. He preyed on students, young girls mostly, ones from poor families who couldn't fight back. When complaints came, he made them disappear, paid off parents, destroyed records, used connections to bury everything. Rowan's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened on the chair arms. I was the school teacher under him, Elira continued. I didn't know, not at first. By the time I figured it out, he'd already covered his tracks. The mayor was in his pocket, so was the sheriff. I started keeping my own records, tracking the payments, the destroyed complaints, everything. I thought, her voice caught, I thought if I had proof, someone would care. Someone would stop him. Did they? No. The word was bitter. The drought killed the town before I could do anything. Reed left for a new school east of here, Milford Springs. He's probably doing the same thing there right now, and no one knows because I was too much of a coward to act when it mattered. She looked up at him, and Rowan saw the weight she carried wasn't just exhaustion. I walked away, she said. Told myself I'd figure out what to do with the ledger once I got somewhere safe. But there is no safe, is there? Not for something like this, so I just kept walking until I couldn't anymore. Rowan was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was measured. My father ran this ranch for 30 years, built it from nothing. He taught me that land doesn't make you decent, choices do, and that when you see something wrong, you've got two options, fix it or become part of it. He stood, leaving the ledger on the bed. You're welcome to stay here until you're recovered. After that, what you do with that book is your business. But if you want help, you ask. Understood? Elira stared at him. Why would you help me? Because someone should have the first time you asked. He moved toward the door, then paused. And because I've got a sister and a boy under this roof, men like Reed don't stop unless someone stops them. He left her alone with the ledger and her thoughts. Recovery was slower than Elira wanted and faster than Tessa allowed. By the third day, Elira could stand without her legs shaking. By the fifth, she was walking to the kitchen for meals. By the seventh, Tessa put her to work shelling peas, declaring that idle hands made for slow healing. Mercer Ranch wasn't large by frontier standards, but it was prosperous in ways that stood out starkly against the drought-ravaged landscape. The main house was solid timber with a deep porch flanked by a barn, stable, and 2 bunkhouses for the hands. 3 wells dotted the property, each one pulling water from deep aquifers that kept the grass green and the cattle fat. Rowan ran a crew of 8 men, most of them seasoned ranch hands who'd worked the land for years. Elira met Cal on her 4th day out of bed. The boy was thin and quiet, with dark hair and eyes that watched everything. 14 years old, Tessa said, orphaned 2 years ago when his family's homestead failed. Rowan had taken him in, given him work and a place to sleep. Cal didn't talk much, but he worked hard, and he watched Elira with the wary curiosity of someone used to people leaving. He'll warm up, Tessa said as they hung laundry together. Took him 6 months to say more than 3 words at a time to me. Elira pinned a sheet to the line. How long have you been here? Since the beginning. Rowan and I built this place with our father. After he died, Rowan took over. I handled the books, the house, and making sure my brother doesn't work himself into an early grave. Tessa shot her a sideways glance. I saw your handwriting in that ledger. You're educated. I was a teacher. We could use someone who can handle accounts. Our last bookkeeper quit 3 months ago, moved back east. Rowan's been managing it himself, but he's got enough on his plate. Tessa paused. Not asking you to decide now, just putting it out there. Elira didn't respond immediately. She'd been thinking about what came next, where she'd go once she was strong enough to leave. The ledger sat in her room, waiting. But the truth was, she had no plan. No money beyond the $17 she'd started with. No destination. I'll think about it, she said finally. Tessa nodded and went back to work. The trouble started on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after Elira arrived. Rowan and 2 of his hands were riding the southern pasture when they found the fence cut. 20 feet of wire snipped clean through, posts knocked over. 30 head of cattle had wandered through the gap, mixing with strays that didn't belong to Mercer Ranch. Hasn't been cut, one of the hands said, kneeling by the wire. This was done deliberate. Rowan's jaw tightened. He knew what it meant. The Hendricks family ran a spread 15 miles south, and they'd been making noise about water rights for the past year. The drought had turned neighborly disputes into something uglier. Mercer Ranch had water. Others didn't. That made for bad blood. Fix the fence, Rowan said, and keep your eyes open. This wasn't random. They spent the rest of the day rounding up the scattered cattle and repairing the line. By the time Rowan returned to the house, it was nearly dark, and he was in a foul mood. Elira was in the kitchen working on the ranch accounts at the table. Tessa had handed the books over 3 days ago, and Elira had been systematically organizing them ever since. She looked up as Rowan entered. Problem? She asked. Someone cut our fence. Let cattle loose. Rowan poured himself coffee and sat down heavily. It'll get worse before it gets better. Elira set down her pencil. Neighbors? Maybe. Or rustlers. Or just idiots looking to make trouble. He rubbed his face. The drought's making people desperate. We've got water and they don't. That breeds resentment. Have you thought about selling water? Rowan looked at her sharply. What? Selling it. Not the land, just access. Controlled, regulated, charge enough to make it worth your while, but not so much that it drives people to sabotage. Elira tapped the ledger. You're sitting on the most valuable resource in the region. Right now you're hoarding it, which makes you a target. If you share it strategically, you change the dynamic. Rowan was silent, considering. That could work, or it could open the door for people to take advantage. Then you set terms, clear contracts. Violations mean immediate revocation of access. Elira pulled a clean sheet of paper toward her. You said choices matter. This is a choice. Control the situation before it controls you. He studied her for a long moment. You've got a practical mind. I was a teacher in a town that was dying. Practical was all I had. Rowan nodded slowly. Draw up a proposal. I want to see what it looks like on paper. Elira picked up her pencil and got to work. The water agreement took 2 weeks to draft and another week to implement. Rowan met with neighboring ranchers, presenting the terms Elira had laid out. Limited access to Mercer wells for a fee, with strict usage rules and penalties for violations. Some ranchers balked. Others, desperate enough to swallow pride, agreed. It didn't solve everything. The Hendricks family refused outright, and 2 smaller spreads accused Rowan of profiteering. But it eased the tension enough that the sabotage stopped, and cattle stayed where they belonged. Elira watched it all from the margins, surprised at how easily her words had translated into action. She'd expected to be gone by now, recovered and moving on. But Tessa kept finding work for her, and Rowan kept asking her opinion on ranch matters. And Cal had started sitting with her during meals, not talking much but present. The ledger stayed in her room, hidden beneath the mattress. One night, Tessa found her on the porch after dinner, staring at the horizon. You're still here, Tessa said, sitting on the railing. Seems that way. You don't have to stay. You know that, right? You're recovered. You can leave whenever you want. Elira was quiet. I keep thinking I should. But I don't know where I'd go. She looked at Tessa. I spent 4 years in Ashton Flats teaching children who deserved better than they got. I did everything right. followed the rules, trusted the system, believed that good work mattered, and in the end, none of it stopped what happened. I walked away with nothing but a book full of crimes no one will ever answer for. So what are you going to do about it? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. I don't know yet, Illyra said. Tessa stood. Well, when you figure it out, let us know. In the meantime, you're useful here. Might as well stay useful. She went inside, leaving Illyra alone with the night and her thoughts. The answer came a month later in the form of a letter. It arrived with the weekly supply wagon, addressed to no one in particular but marked with the name Milford Springs in the return corner. Rowan brought it to the kitchen where Illyra was reconciling accounts. This came for you, he said, setting the envelope on the table. Illyra stared at it. I didn't ask for anything from Milford Springs. It's not from there. It's from a woman named Sarah Pritchard. Says she got your name from someone in Ashton Flats. Rowan hesitated. She's asking for help. Illyra's hand stilled. Slowly, she picked up the envelope and opened it. The letter inside was written in shaky script, the kind that came from someone not used to writing. Miss Vane, my name is Sarah Pritchard. I was told you might understand. My daughter is 12. She attends school in Milford Springs. The schoolmaster is a man named Silas Reed. He has been inappropriate with her. When I complained, I was told to keep quiet or face consequences. I do not know what to do. I do not know who to trust. But someone said you might know about Mr. Reed. If that is true, please help us. Please do not let him do to my daughter what he has done to others. Respectfully, Sarah Pritchard. Illyra read the letter twice. Her hands trembled. He's doing it again, she said quietly. He moved to a new school, and he's doing it again. Rowan sat down across from her. What do you need? Illyra looked up at him, and for the first time since collapsing at the fence, she felt something shift inside her. Not hope exactly, but something harder, something sharper. I need to stop him. How? She looked at the ledger sitting on the shelf behind her, then back at Rowan. I'm going to Milford Springs, she said, and I'm going to make sure Silas Reed never hides behind charm and money again. Rowan nodded once. When do we leave? Illyra blinked. We? You think I'm letting you ride into a town full of people protecting a predator by yourself? He stood. Tessa can handle the ranch. Cal, too. You want to do this? We do it smart. That means backup. For a moment, Illyra couldn't speak. She'd spent so long carrying the weight alone that the idea of someone else shouldering it felt foreign. Thank you, she said finally. Don't thank me yet. We've got work to do. Thus, they spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Illyra wrote back to Sarah Pritchard, careful not to promise anything, but offering enough hope to keep the woman from losing faith. She reviewed the ledger again, memorizing names, dates, amounts. Every piece of evidence mattered. Every detail was a weapon. Rowan made discreet inquiries about Milford Springs, who ran the town, who held power, who might be sympathetic. The answers weren't encouraging. The mayor was a business partner of Silas Reed's father. The sheriff owed money to the same family. The town had money, which meant it had lawyers and influence. This isn't going to be easy, Rowan said one night as they reviewed their plan. I didn't expect easy, Illyra replied. I just need it to work. What's the end game? You expose him, then what? Men like Reed have connections. They lawyer up, drag things out, make you look like the villain. Illyra's expression was cold. Then I make it impossible for them to ignore. I make the cost of protecting him higher than the cost of letting him fall. Rowan studied her. You've changed since you got here. I nearly died. That changes a person. It's more than that. He leaned back in his chair. You're not running anymore. Illyra met his gaze. No, I'm not. On the morning they left, Tessa packed supplies and gave Illyra a revolver. You know how to use this? Tessa asked. No. Then learn on the way. Rowan will teach you. Tessa's expression was serious. Be careful. Men like Reed don't go quietly. Cal stood on the porch, silent as always, but he raised one hand in farewell as they rode out. Illyra returned the gesture. The ride to Milford Springs would take 4 days. By the time they arrived, winter would be settling in. The frontier stretched before them, vast and unforgiving. But Illyra Vane was no longer the woman who had collapsed at the fence. She was done being a victim. It was time to become something else. The first night on the trail, Rowan taught Elira how to hold the revolver without flinching. "It's going to kick," he said, guiding her hands into position. "Don't fight it. Let your arms absorb the recoil. And for the love of everything, don't close your eyes when you pull the trigger." They were camped in a shallow ravine, sheltered from the wind. The horses were picketed nearby, and a small fire burned between them. Elira held the gun the way Rowan showed her, feeling the unfamiliar weight of it, the cold metal against her palms. "Aim at that rock," Rowan said, pointing to a dark shape about 20 feet away. "Take your time. Breathe out, then squeeze." Elira lined up the sight, exhaled slowly, and pulled the trigger. The gun barked. Her arms jerked up. The bullet hit dirt 3 feet left of the target. "Again," Rowan said. She fired 5 more rounds before her hands started shaking. Only one shot came close to the rock. Rowan took the gun back and reloaded it with practiced efficiency. "You're rushing," he said, "and you're tensing up right before you fire. The gun knows when you're afraid of it." "I'm not afraid of it." "You're something." He handed it back. "Try again tomorrow. It'll come." Elira set the revolver aside and flexed her fingers. They tingled from the recoil. She'd never held a weapon before coming to Mercer Ranch, never imagined she'd need to. Teachers didn't carry guns. Teachers relied on words, rules, the assumption that civilization would protect them. That assumption had cost her everything. "Why are you really doing this?" Elira asked, watching Rowan tend the fire. "You don't owe me anything. You could have left me to die at that fence." Rowan was quiet for a moment, poking at the coals with a stick. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "My mother died when Tessa was 10. Fever took her in 3 days. After that, it was just my father raising us. He was a hard man, but fair. Taught us that the world doesn't fix itself. People do, or they don't." He looked up at her. "About 6 years ago, a man came through looking for work. Name was Peter Gaines. He worked for us 2 seasons, kept to himself mostly. Then one day Cal's mother showed up at our door. She was Peter's wife. Said he'd been sending her money, but it stopped coming. She was worried." "Oh?" "Za Mose." Rowan fell silent, his jaw tight. "We found Peter 3 days later," he continued. "One of the other hands had been cheating at cards, accused Peter of the same when Peter caught him. They fought. Peter ended up with a knife in his ribs. The hand who did it ran before we could bring him in." "And Cal's mother?" "Died giving birth to Cal's younger sister. The sister didn't make it either. Cal was 12, had nowhere to go." Rowan tossed the stick into the fire. "So we kept him. Because someone had to. And because my father would have done the same." Elira absorbed this. "You think I'm like Cal? Someone who needs saving?" "No?" Rowan met her eyes. "I think you're someone who's been carrying weight alone too long. And I think people like Silas Reed count on women like you staying silent because fighting back costs too much." He paused. "I'm tired of men like that winning." The fire crackled between them. Elira felt something shift in her chest, not gratitude exactly, but recognition. Rowan understood what she was doing because he'd lived in the same world, seen the same injustices. He just had the resources and privilege to fight them in ways she never could. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Save it until we're done. There's a long road between here and Milford Springs." They rode in silence through the second day, covering ground steadily. The landscape shifted gradually from the open plains around Mercer Ranch to rolling hills dotted with scrub oak. The drought's grip was visible everywhere: dead grass, dried creek beds, cattle skeletons bleaching in the sun. They passed abandoned homesteads, families who'd given up and moved on. Each empty house was a monument to failure. By the third day, Elira was sore in muscles she didn't know existed. Riding was different from walking, different from anything she'd done in Ashton Flats. But she didn't complain. Complaining felt like weakness, and she'd already been weak enough for one lifetime. They stopped for the night near a stream that still held water, a rare thing. Rowan checked the horses while Elira gathered firewood. The routine was becoming familiar. Set camp, tend animals, eat, sleep, repeat. It gave her time to think, to plan what came next. "Tell me about Milford Springs," Elira said as they ate. Rowan had shot a rabbit that afternoon, and it was roasting over the fire. "What do we know? It's bigger than Ashton Flats. Maybe 300 people. Sits on a rail line, which means commerce and money. The school's well-funded, attracts families from surrounding areas. Rowan tore off a piece of meat. Silas Reed's been there 8 months. Before him, the schoolmaster was a woman named Agnes Whitmore. She retired, moved back east to live with family. Convenient timing, or planned. Reed's father has business interests in Milford Springs. Manufacturing, I think. That's the connection that got Reed the job. Rowan handed her a portion of the rabbit. The mayor's name is Charles Brennan. He and Reed's father are partners in some venture. The sheriff is a man named Dwayne Cutler. Local boy, elected 3 years ago. No scandals, but no backbone either. Elira chewed slowly, thinking. So Reed has protection at every level, just like in Ashton Flats. Probably, but there's a difference this time. What's that? You. Rowan's gaze was steady. Last time, you were alone and trying to work within a system designed to protect him. This time, you're not playing by their rules. Elira felt a flicker of something dangerous in her chest. What rules are we playing by? Ours. The answer should have worried her. Instead, it felt like permission. That night, Elira dreamed of the schoolhouse in Ashton Flats. She was standing at the front of the classroom, and the desks were full of students. But their faces were blurred, indistinct. She tried to teach them, but no words came out. When she looked down, her hands were covered in ink that wouldn't wash off. She woke before dawn, shaking. Rowan was already up, saddling the horses. He glanced at her, but didn't ask about the nightmare written across her face. She was grateful for that. They reached Milford Springs on the afternoon of the 4th day. The town rose out of the prairie like an act of defiance against the drought. Brick buildings lined a main street that stretched 6 blocks, flanked by boardwalks and gas lamps. A train depot sat at the eastern edge, trains coming and going twice daily. People moved with purpose, dressed in clothes that hadn't seen hard labor. This was a town that had money, and it showed. Rowan led them to a boarding house on the outskirts, a modest place run by a widow named Mrs. Talbot. They rented 2 rooms under false names. Rowan was Robert Mason, a cattleman looking into business opportunities. Elira was his sister, Eleanor, along to keep him out of trouble. Mrs. Talbot accepted the story without question and took their money. Once settled, Rowan went out to gather information while Elira stayed behind, reviewing the ledger one more time. She'd memorized most of it by now, but repetition helped. Every name, every date, every payment, it all had to be perfect. When Rowan returned 2 hours later, he had news. "Found the school," he said, closing the door behind him. "It's on the north end of town, big stone building, well maintained. Reed lives in a house adjacent to the school grounds, provided by the district. Did you see him?" "Briefly. He was leaving the school with another man. Well-dressed, confident, looks exactly like you'd expect." Elira's jaw tightened. Hearing Rowan describe Silas Reed made him real again, not just a name in a ledger. She remembered his voice, the way he smiled at parents while lying through his teeth, the way he made people trust him. "I need to see Sarah Pritchard," Elira said. "The woman who wrote the letter. She's the key to all of this. Tomorrow. Tonight, we lay low and figure out who else might help." Rowan sat down across from her. "We can't just walk into town and start making accusations. Reed has friends here. We need allies." "Where do we find those?" "Church is a good start. People talk after services. We listen." He pulled out a folded paper. "There's also a newspaper editor named Louisa Hart. Woman runs the Milford Gazette. She's got a reputation for printing stories the mayor doesn't like. Might be sympathetic." Elira considered. "Newspapers have power. If we can get her to print the evidence, big if. She'll want proof and she'll want to know it's legitimate. We bring her half a story and she'll tear us apart. Then we bring her the whole story." Rowan nodded slowly, one step at a time. "First, we talked to Sarah Pritchard." They found Sarah Pritchard's house the next morning. It was a small, neat cottage on the west side of town, with a vegetable garden out front and curtains in the windows. Elira knocked while Rowan waited near the street, keeping watch. The woman who answered was thin and pale, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying recently. When she saw Elira, confusion crossed her face. "Can I help you? Mrs. Pritchard? My name is Elira Vane. I received your letter." Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to shock, then fear. She glanced past Elira to Rowan, then back. "You shouldn't be here," Sarah whispered. "If anyone sees..." Please, just give me 5 minutes. Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. Elira entered quickly, and Rowan followed. The inside of the house was modest but clean, with simple furniture and a small fireplace. A young girl sat at the table working on schoolwork. She looked up when they entered, her face guarded. "Emily, go to your room," Sarah said quietly. The girl obeyed without argument, disappearing down a hallway. Once she was gone, Sarah turned to Elira, arms crossed defensively. "Why did you come here?" Sarah's voice shook. "I wrote that letter weeks ago. I didn't think anyone would actually come. I came because what's happening to your daughter happened to others, and because someone needs to stop it." Elira pulled the ledger from her bag. "I have evidence. Records from Ashton Flats showing what Silas Reed did there. Payments he took to cover up complaints. Families he silenced." Sarah stared at the ledger like it was a snake. "Evidence doesn't matter. I already tried. I went to the sheriff. He said Emily was confused, that Mr. Reed would never do such a thing. When I pushed, he told me to stop spreading lies or face consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "He said they'd look into my husband's business, find code violations, tax issues, anything to hurt us." Sarah's voice cracked. "We can't afford to lose everything. We just can't." Elira felt rage simmering beneath her skin. It was the same story, the same threats. Men like Reed didn't just hurt their victims. They destroyed anyone who tried to fight back. "What if you didn't have to face it alone?" Elira said carefully. "What if there were others willing to stand with you?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "There are no others. Everyone's too afraid. The families with money protect Reed because they're tied to his father. The families without money can't afford to make waves. We're trapped." Rowan spoke for the first time. "Then we untrap you." Sarah looked at him, startled. "Who are you?" "Someone who's sick of cowards hiding behind power." Rowan's tone was flat. "You said the sheriff threatened your husband's business. What does your husband do?" "He's a carpenter. He builds furniture, does repair work." "And the code violations they threatened, real or invented?" "Invented. Thomas runs an honest business, but that doesn't matter if they decide to come after him." Rowan nodded. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to build a case so strong that protecting Reed costs them more than letting him fall. But we need your testimony, your daughter's testimony, and anyone else willing to speak." Sarah shook her head. "No one will speak. I already told you. They will if they see someone else go first." Elira leaned forward. "I was a teacher under Reed in Ashton Flats. I watched him destroy lives. I stayed silent because I was afraid and because I thought the system would handle it. But the system is designed to protect men like him. So this time, we burn the system down." The words hung in the air. Sarah stared at Elira, and for a moment something flickered in her eyes. Not hope exactly, but something harder. "What do you need from me?" Sarah asked quietly. "Everything you can remember. Dates, times, what happened, what was said. I need it written down, signed, and witnessed. And I need you to be ready to stand behind it publicly when the time comes." "And if they come after my family?" "They won't." Rowan's voice was certain. "Because if they do, they'll answer to me." Sarah looked between them. Elira could see the calculations running through the woman's mind. The risk, the fear, the desperate hope that maybe this time would be different. "I'll do it," Sarah said finally, "but I need one promise from you." "Name it." "If this doesn't work, if they come after us and you can't stop it, you get Emily out. You take her somewhere safe. Promise me." Elira met Sarah's eyes. "I promise." Sarah nodded once, then left the room. She returned a few minutes later with paper and a pen. For the next hour, she wrote. Elira and Rowan sat silently, watching. When Sarah finished, her hands were shaking. "There are 2 other families I know of," Sarah said, handing the pages to Elira. "The Carters and the Morgans. Their daughters attend the same school. I've seen the way Reed looks at them. But I don't know if they'll talk." "Give me their addresses," Elira said. "I'll try." Sarah wrote down 2 more addresses. As they prepared to leave, Emily emerged from her room. She looked small and scared, but her eyes were sharp. "Are you really going to stop him?" Emily asked Elira. Elira knelt down to the girl's level. "Yes." "How?" "By making sure everyone knows what he is. By taking away the power that lets him hide." Emily studied her face. My mother says you were a teacher. I was. Were you a good teacher? The question caught Elira off guard. She thought about her classroom in Ashton Flats, the students she'd failed by staying silent. I tried to be, Elira said honestly, but I made mistakes. I'm trying to fix them now. Emily nodded slowly, as if that answer satisfied her. Okay. As Elira and Rowan left the house, Elira felt the weight of Emily's trust like a stone in her chest. The girl believed her. Sarah believed her. They'd given her their testimony, their hope, their safety. She couldn't fail them the way she'd failed others. The next 2 days were spent methodically building the case. Elira visited the Carter family and found them unwilling to talk. Mrs. Carter shut the door in her face, terror written across her features. Mr. Carter was more direct. Leave us alone. We don't want trouble. The Morgans were different. Ruth Morgan was a seamstress, her husband a clerk at the rail depot. When Elira explained why she'd come, Ruth didn't cry or panic. She just nodded. I knew something was wrong, Ruth said. My daughter Anna changed after the school year started. She stopped smiling, started having nightmares. When I asked what was wrong, she wouldn't say, but I knew. Will she talk about it? I don't know, but I'll ask. Ruth's expression hardened. If there's a chance to stop him, we have to take it. Anna was 13, quiet and withdrawn. When Ruth gently asked her about Mr. Reed, the girl flinched, but slowly, haltingly, she told her story. Elira listened, taking notes, her heart breaking with every word. By the end, Anna was crying, and Ruth was holding her daughter like she could shield her from the past. I'm sorry, Elira said when Anna finished. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Anna wiped her eyes. Will he go to jail? If I have anything to say about it, yes. Good. With 2 testimonies secured, Elira and Rowan turned their attention to Louisa Hart, the newspaper editor. They found her at the Milford Gazette office, a cramped space above a dry goods store. Louisa was a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with ink stains on her fingers and skepticism written across her face. You're telling me Silas Reed is a predator and you have proof, Louisa said, after Elira explained why they were there. Why haven't you gone to the sheriff? Because the sheriff is protecting him, Elira replied. Just like the mayor, just like everyone with power in this town. Louisa leaned back in her chair. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Elira set the ledger on the desk. This is from Ashton Flats, where Reed worked before Milford Springs. It documents every bribe he paid, every complaint he buried, every family he silenced. I also have testimonies from 2 families here in Milford Springs. Their daughters have been victimized by Reed. The pattern is the same. Louisa opened the ledger and began reading. The room fell silent except for the ticking of a clock on the wall. Elira watched the editor's expression shift from skepticism to concentration to something darker. After 10 minutes, Louisa closed the ledger. This is damning, she said quietly, but it's also dangerous. Reed's father has connections. The mayor will bury this if he can, and printing it could ruin me. Or it could expose a system that protects predators, Elira shot back. Isn't that why you became a journalist? To hold people accountable? Louisa smiled faintly. You've got fire. I'll give you that. She tapped the ledger. Here's the problem. I print this and Reed's lawyers will come after me. They'll say it's slander, demand retractions, tie me up in court until I'm bankrupt. Unless... She paused. Unless I have ironclad proof that can't be disputed. Multiple sources, documents, testimonies that hold up under scrutiny. Can you give me that? Yes? Then I need a week. I need to verify every claim in this ledger, interview the families, and build a story so tight they can't wriggle out of it. Louisa's eyes were hard. But if you're lying, if any of this is fabricated, I'll print that instead. Understood? Understood. Louisa stood and extended her hand. Then we have a deal. Elira shook it, feeling the calluses on the editor's palm. This was a woman who worked for her convictions, same as Elira. Together, maybe they had a chance. That night, back at the boarding house, Elira and Rowan reviewed their progress. We have 2 testimonies, the ledger, and a journalist willing to print the story, Rowan said. That's more than I expected. It's not enough. Elira stared at the map of Milford Springs spread across the table. Reed's still walking free. He's still teaching. Every day we wait is another day he has access to children. Rushing this will get us killed, or worse. It'll give them ammunition to discredit everything. Rowan's voice was firm. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. Elira knew he was right, but knowing didn't ease the frustration gnawing at her gut. She thought about Emily, about Anna, about all the girls whose names she'd never know. How many more would suffer while they built their case? I want to see him, Elira said suddenly. Reed, I want to look him in the eye. Rowan frowned. That's a bad idea. Maybe, but I need to. She met his gaze. I've been running from him for months, carrying the weight of his crimes without confronting the man himself. I need to see him. I need to remind myself why I'm doing this. Rowan was silent for a long moment. All right, but we do it smart. No confrontations. You observe, then we leave. Agreed? Agreed. The next morning, they positioned themselves across from the school. It was recess, and children filled the yard, playing and shouting. Elira watched them, remembering her own students in Ashton Flats. These children looked happy, unaware of the danger teaching them. Then Silas Reed stepped out of the building. He looked the same, tall, well-dressed, with an easy smile and confident bearing. He moved through the yard, speaking to students, laughing at their jokes. To anyone watching, he seemed like a caring teacher. Elira felt bile rise in her throat. That's him, she said quietly. Rowan followed her gaze. You all right? No? Her hands were clenched into fists. But I will be. They watched for 10 more minutes. Reed interacted with several girls, his manner friendly but calculated. Elira saw the way he touched their shoulders, the way he leaned in close. Familiar gestures, practiced. When the bell rang and the children filed back inside, Reed lingered in the yard, speaking with another teacher. Then he turned and walked toward the school's side entrance. As he did, his gaze swept across the street and landed directly on Elira. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Reed's expression didn't change. He didn't recognize her. Why would he? She'd been a junior teacher, insignificant. But something in his posture shifted, a subtle wariness, as if he sensed a threat without knowing its source. Then he turned and disappeared inside. Elira exhaled slowly. Her heart was pounding. Let's go, Rowan said, his hand on her elbow. They walked back to the boarding house in silence. Elira's mind churned. Seeing Reed had solidified something inside her. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was personal. He'd destroyed lives, walked away unscathed, and started again as if nothing had happened. She was going to end that pattern, whatever it took. That night, Louisa Hart sent a message to the boarding house. She'd verified the ledger entries and interviewed Sarah Pritchard. The story was taking shape. She needed 3 more days. 3 days felt like an eternity. Elira spent the time refining her plan. She wrote out a timeline of events, cross-referencing the ledger with the testimonies. She identified weak points in Reed's defenses, witnesses who might crack under pressure, documents that could corroborate claims. Rowan helped where he could, but mostly he watched, impressed by the methodical way Elira dismantled Reed's carefully constructed lies. You missed your calling, Rowan said one evening. You should have been a lawyer. Elira smiled bitterly. Lawyers work within the system. I'm done with that. So what are you now? She thought about it. Someone who fixes what the system won't. On the 3rd day, Louisa summoned them to her office. When they arrived, she had the newspaper's front page laid out on her desk. The headline read, Local Schoolmaster Accused of Crimes Against Students. Below it, in smaller type, Evidence reveals pattern of abuse, bribery, and cover-up spanning 2 towns. Elira stared at the page. Seeing it in print made it real in a way that the ledger never had. It runs tomorrow, Louisa said. Once it hits the streets, there's no taking it back. Reed will know, the mayor will know, everyone will know. Good, Elira said. Louisa studied her. You understand what you've started here? This isn't just one man going down. This is going to shake the entire town. People are going to get hurt. People are already hurt. We're just making it visible. Louisa nodded slowly. All right then, let's burn it down. The newspaper hit the streets at 6 in the morning. Elira didn't sleep the night before. She sat by the window of her room at the boarding house, watching the darkness slowly give way to gray dawn, her mind running through every possible outcome. By the time the first delivery wagon rattled past with bundles of the Milford Gazette, her nerves were wound so tight she felt like she might shatter. Rowan knocked on her door at 6:30. "It's done," he said simply. They walked to the main street together. Already people were gathering outside the newspaper office, the general store, anywhere papers were sold. Alira watched as a man unfolded his copy, scanned the headline, then went still. Another woman read while walking and nearly collided with a hitching post. A shopkeeper stood in his doorway, paper hanging from his hands, mouth open. The reaction spread like fire through dry grass. By 8 o'clock, the town was in chaos. Alira and Rowan positioned themselves at a cafe across from the school, watching. Parents arrived in clusters, some shouting, some silent and grim. The school doors stayed closed. Two men Alira didn't recognize stood guard at the entrance, turning people away. When a father tried to push past them, one of the guards shoved him back hard enough to send him sprawling. "That's going to get ugly," Rowan muttered. He was right. Within a minute, more parents arrived, and the crowd grew hostile. Voices rose. Someone threw a rock that shattered a window. The guards retreated inside and locked the doors. "Where's Reed?" Alira scanned the building. "He should be here." If he's smart, he's already gone. But Reed wasn't gone. At 9 o'clock, a carriage pulled up to the side entrance of the school. The door opened and Silas Reed emerged, flanked by two men in expensive suits. Lawyers, Alira guessed. Reed's face was pale but composed. He walked with his head high, ignoring the shouts from the crowd as he climbed into the carriage. Before the door closed, his eyes swept the street one more time. They landed on Alira. This time, recognition flickered across his face. His expression shifted from confidence to confusion to something darker. He knew. Maybe not her name, maybe not the specifics, but he knew she was connected to this. The carriage door slammed shut, and the driver snapped the reins. The horses lurched forward, scattering the crowd. People jumped back, cursing. Someone threw another rock, but it bounced harmlessly off the carriage roof. Alira watched until the carriage disappeared around a corner. "He saw me," she said. "I know. He's going to come after us." "Let him try." Rowan's jaw was set. "We've got the truth on our side." "Truth doesn't stop bullets." Rowan turned to look at her. "You want to back out now?" Alira met his gaze. "No." "Then we keep moving forward." By midday, the town had split into factions. Some people believed the newspaper story. Others called it slander, a coordinated attack on a respectable man by troublemakers and liars. The mayor's office issued a statement declaring the accusations baseless and promising a full investigation. The sheriff announced he was looking into the matter, but cautioned against rushing to judgment. It was exactly what Alira had expected. The system protecting itself. That afternoon, Louisa Hart received a visit from two lawyers representing Silas Reed. They demanded a retraction and threatened legal action. Louisa refused. The lawyers left, promising she'd regret her decision. An hour later, someone threw a brick through the Gazette office window. Alira and Rowan were there when it happened. They'd gone to check on Louisa and found her sweeping glass off the floor, her face tight with anger. "Cowards," Louisa spat. "Can't win the argument, so they break windows." "Are you all right?" Alira asked. "Fine, but they made their point." Louisa set the broom aside. "The mayor's office contacted me, said if I print another word about Reed, they'll pull all town advertising from the paper. That's half my revenue." "What are you going to do?" Louisa smiled grimly. "Print another word about Reed. They think I'll back down because they threaten my livelihood? I've been broke before. I'll be broke again. But I won't be a coward." Alira felt a surge of respect for the woman. "What do you need from us?" "More sources. Right now I've got 2 families on record in your ledger." "That's good, but it's not enough to bury him. I need more people willing to speak publicly, preferably someone with standing in this community who can't be easily dismissed." "We're working on it," Rowan said. "Work faster. Reed's lawyers are already spreading counter-narratives. They're saying you're a disgruntled former employee with a grudge, that the families are after money, that the ledger is fabricated." Louisa's expression was hard. "We've got momentum now, but it won't last if we can't back up every claim with ironclad evidence." That evening, Alira received an unexpected visitor at the boarding house. Mrs. Talbot knocked on her door and handed her a sealed envelope. "Man left this for you," Mrs. Talbot said. Didn't give his name, said it was urgent. Alira took the envelope and waited until Mrs. Talbot left before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. Miss Vane, we need to talk. Come to the church on Elm Street tonight at 8 o'clock. Come alone. I have information about Reed that you need to hear. A friend. Elira showed the note to Rowan. It's a trap, he said immediately. Maybe. Or maybe it's someone who wants to help but can't do it publicly. Either way, you're not going alone. The note says, I don't care what the note says. Rowan's tone left no room for argument. You go, I go. We just won't advertise the fact. At 7:45, they left the boarding house. The church on Elm Street was a modest building at the edge of town, white clapboard with a small bell tower. The surrounding area was quiet, most people already home for the evening. Elira approached the front entrance while Rowan circled to the back, staying out of sight but close enough to intervene if needed. The church door was unlocked. Elira stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by a few candles near the altar. Wooden pews stretched in neat rows toward the front. The air smelled of old wood and candle wax. Elira moved slowly down the center aisle, her hand resting on the revolver hidden beneath her coat. Rowan had insisted she carry it. Now she was glad. Miss Vane. The voice came from the shadows near the altar. A figure stepped forward into the candlelight. A man in his 60s, well-dressed, with silver hair and a lined face. Elira recognized him from around town, but couldn't place his name. Who are you? She asked, keeping her distance. My name is Thomas Whitmore. I'm the brother of Agnes Whitmore, the school teacher who preceded Silas Reed. He gestured to a pew. Please, sit. We don't have much time. Elira sat but kept her hand near the revolver. Thomas sat across the aisle from her, his posture weary. Why did you ask me here? Elira said. Because my sister is dying and she has things she needs to say before she goes. Thomas's voice was heavy. Things about Silas Reed. Elira leaned forward. What things? Agnes didn't retire voluntarily. She was forced out. Reed's father wanted the position for his son, so they manufactured reasons to remove her. Accusations of incompetence, mismanagement, failure to maintain discipline. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. They had the mayor's support, and Agnes couldn't fight them. Thomas's hands trembled slightly. But before she left, she found something. Documents hidden in Reed's desk, letters from his previous position, complaints from families, evidence that he'd been moved quietly from one school to another after incidents were reported. Where are those documents now? Agnes kept them. She was going to expose Reed, but then she got sick. Cancer. It moved fast. She's been staying with me these past months, and she's not going to last much longer. Thomas met Elira's eyes. When she read your article this morning, she told me to find you. She wants to give you the documents. She wants Reed to answer for what he's done. Why didn't she come forward sooner? Because she was afraid. Because she thought no one would believe her. Because fighting powerful men is exhausting, and she was already dying. Thomas's voice broke. But you did what she couldn't. You stood up, and she wants to help you finish it. Elira felt something tighten in her chest. Where is she? At my house. She's too weak to travel, but if you come to her, she'll give you everything. When? Tonight. Now, if you're willing. Elira stood. Take me to her. Thomas's house was a 10-minute walk from the church, a comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood. Rowan materialized from the shadows as they left the church, and Thomas startled. He's with me, Elira said. I don't go anywhere alone. Thomas nodded and led them through darkened streets. When they reached his house, he unlocked the door and ushered them inside. The interior was warm, lit by oil lamps. A woman sat in a rocking chair near the fireplace, wrapped in blankets despite the warmth. She was painfully thin, her skin almost translucent, but her eyes were sharp. Agnes, Thomas said gently. This is Elira Vane. Agnes studied Elira for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You look like hell. Elira laughed despite herself. So do you. Cancer will do that. Agnes gestured to a chair. Sit. We don't have time for pleasantries. Elira sat. Rowan stood by the door watchful. Thomas moved to his sister's side, hovering protectively. Agnes reached beside her chair and pulled out a leather portfolio. She handed it to Elira. Everything's in there, Agnes said. Letters from families in Reed's previous town, complaints filed with the school board, correspondence showing how his father paid to have the complaints buried. There's also a letter from the superintendent at Reed's first teaching position, warning against hiring him. Reed's father intercepted it before it reached the school board here. Elira opened the portfolio. Inside were dozens of documents, neatly organized. She scanned them quickly, her heart pounding. This was it. This was the proof that Reed's pattern went back years, that he'd been protected repeatedly by powerful people willing to cover for him. "Why did you keep these?" Elira asked. "Because I knew what he was. I saw the way he looked at the girls. I heard the rumors. And I knew that men like Reed don't stop unless someone forces them to." Agnes coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Thomas handed her a handkerchief. "I kept them because I thought someday someone would have the courage to use them. I just didn't think I'd live to see it." "You're seeing it now," Agnes smiled. "Yes, I am." She paused, catching her breath. "There's one more thing you should know. Reed's father isn't just protecting his son out of family loyalty. He's protecting himself." "What do you mean?" "Reed's father, Gerald Reed, has business interests all over this region. Investments, partnerships, political connections. If his son is exposed as a predator, it raises questions about what Gerald knew and when he knew it. It threatens his reputation, his business, everything he's built." Agnes's eyes were fierce. "That's why they'll fight so hard to bury this. It's not just about Silas, it's about the entire Reed empire." Elira absorbed this. The scope of what they were challenging had just expanded exponentially. "How do I prove Gerald Reed knew?" Elira asked. "You can't, directly. But you can follow the money. Every time Silas got in trouble, Gerald paid to fix it. Those payments are documented in financial records. If you can get access to Gerald's accounts, you'll find the trail." Agnes coughed again, harder this time. "But that's dangerous territory. Gerald Reed has resources you can't imagine. He can destroy you financially, legally, even physically if he decides you're enough of a threat." "Then I'll have to be more careful." Agnes laughed, which turned into another coughing fit. When it passed, she looked at Elira with something like admiration. "You remind me of myself 30 years ago, back when I still thought I could change the world." Her expression softened. "Be smarter than I was. Don't fight alone. And don't underestimate how far powerful men will go to protect themselves." "I won't," Agnes nodded. "Good. Now get out of here. You've got work to do, and I need to rest." Elira stood clutching the portfolio. "Thank you. For this. For everything." "Don't thank me. Just finish it." Thomas walked them to the door. As they were leaving, he touched Elira's arm. "She won't last the week," he said quietly, "but she'll die easier knowing someone finally stood up to Reed." Elira didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded and stepped out into the night. Back at the boarding house, Elira and Rowan spread Agnes's documents across the table. They spent hours going through them, cross-referencing with Elira's ledger, building a timeline that spanned a decade. The pattern was undeniable. Silas Reed had been preying on students since his first teaching position, and his father had been covering for him the entire time. "This changes everything," Rowan said. "With this, we're not just going after Reed, we're going after his whole family." "Good." "Elira," Rowan's tone was cautious. "Gerald Reed is dangerous, more dangerous than his son. If we move on him, he'll come back at us with everything he's got. Then we hit him first, and we hit him hard enough that he can't recover." Rowan studied her face. "You've changed since we left the ranch." "I told you, almost dying changes a person. It's more than that. You're not just trying to stop Reed anymore. You want blood." Elira met his eyes. "I want justice. If that requires blood, so be it." The next morning, Louisa Hart published a follow-up article. This one focused on Gerald Reed's role in protecting his son, using Agnes's documents as evidence. The headline read, "Father's money bought son's freedom. Financial records reveal decade of cover-ups." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gerald Reed held a press conference at noon, flanked by lawyers and politicians. He stood on the steps of the town hall, a commanding figure in an expensive suit, and addressed the crowd that had gathered. "These accusations are baseless and offensive," Gerald declared, his voice ringing across the square. "My son is a dedicated educator who has been slandered by malicious individuals with personal vendettas. The so-called evidence is fabricated, and those responsible will face legal consequences for their lies." Someone in the crowd shouted back, "What about the families? Are they lying too?" Gerald's expression hardened. "I cannot comment on ongoing investigations, but I assure you the truth will come out, And when it does, those who spread these falsehoods will regret it. The crowd murmured. Elira, watching from the edge of the square, saw the calculation in Gerald's performance. He was playing to the people who wanted to believe him, the ones invested in maintaining the status quo. And it was working. Doubt was creeping back in. That afternoon, 2 more families came forward with testimonies against Silas Reed. One was the Carter family, the ones who'd slammed the door in Elira's face. Mrs. Carter arrived at the Gazette office with her daughter, both of them terrified but determined. The other was a family from a neighboring town where Reed had taught years ago. They'd seen the articles and decided they could no longer stay silent. Louisa interviewed them both, recording their stories with meticulous care. By evening, she had enough for another article. But before she could publish it, the sheriff arrived with a warrant. Elira was at the Gazette office when it happened. Sheriff Cutler walked in with 2 deputies, his face grim. "Louisa Hart, you're under arrest for criminal libel and defamation." Louisa stood slowly. "On whose complaint?" "Gerald Reed, he's filed formal charges." "This is horseshit, Dwayne, and you know it." "Maybe, but I've got a warrant and I'm taking you in." Cutler looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Louisa glanced at Elira, then back at the sheriff. "Fine, but I want a lawyer present before you ask me a single question." "That's your right." They led Louisa out in handcuffs. Elira watched, fury building in her chest. This was the system in action. Silence the messenger, control the narrative, protect the powerful. Rowan appeared at her side. "They're trying to shut us down." "They won't succeed." "Elira, without Louisa, we lose our platform. The Gazette was our way of reaching people. Now that's gone. Then we find another way." That night, Elira made a decision. If the system wouldn't deliver justice, she'd bypass the system entirely. She'd go directly to the source. She'd confront Silas Reed herself. Rowan tried to talk her out of it. "This is exactly what they want. They're baiting you into doing something reckless so they can paint you as unstable, vindictive, dangerous." "I don't care what they paint me as." "You should, because if you lose credibility, everything we've built collapses." "Then I won't lose credibility." Elira checked the revolver, making sure it was loaded. "I'm not going to shoot him. I'm just going to talk." "Talk about what?" "About the fact that I know everything. That I have evidence he can't refute. That his father can't protect him anymore because the truth is already out." She looked at Rowan. "I want him to know he's finished. I want to see it in his eyes." Rowan was silent for a long moment. "If you're doing this, I'm coming with you." "No, you're staying here. If this goes wrong, someone needs to be able to finish what we started." "Elira, please," she put her hand on his arm. "Trust me, I need to do this alone." Rowan's jaw tightened, but finally he nodded. "You've got 2 hours. If you're not back by then, I'm coming after you." "Fair enough." Elira left the boarding house just after 10 o'clock. The streets were mostly empty, the respectable people of Milford Springs tucked safely in their homes. She walked with purpose, the revolver a reassuring weight beneath her coat. Agnes's portfolio was tucked under her arm, every piece of damning evidence carefully organized. Silas Reed lived in a small house adjacent to the school grounds, provided by the district as part of his compensation. It was dark when Elira arrived, but she could see lamplight in one window. He was home. She knocked on the door. Footsteps approached, and the door opened. Reed stood there, still dressed despite the late hour, a glass of whiskey in his hand. When he saw Elira, his expression shifted from surprise to wariness. "Miss Vane, I wondered when you'd show up." So he did remember her name. That was interesting. "We need to talk," Elira said. Reed studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." Elira entered cautiously. The house was neat, almost sterile, with minimal personal touches. Books lined one wall, teaching materials stacked on a desk. Reed closed the door behind her and gestured to a chair. "Drink?" he offered. "No." Reed sat down across from her, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "You've caused quite a stir, Miss Vane. My father is very unhappy." "I don't care about your father's happiness." "Clearly." Reed took a sip of whiskey. "So what do you want? To gloat? To threaten me? To demand I confess?" Elira set the portfolio on the table between them. "I want you to understand that it's over. Everything you've done, every life you've destroyed, every bribe your father paid, It's all documented. It's all public. And no amount of lawyers or money or intimidation is going to make it go away. Reed opened the portfolio and glanced through the documents. His expression remained calm, almost bored. These prove nothing, he said. Allegations, hearsay, financial records that could mean anything. My lawyers will tear this apart in court. Maybe, but the court of public opinion doesn't require the same burden of proof, and that court has already decided you're guilty. Public opinion is fickle. Give it 2 weeks, and people will move on to the next scandal. Reed closed the portfolio. You're not the first person who's tried to destroy me, Miss Vane. You won't be the last, but you will fail, just like the others. The others didn't have what I have, which is nothing to lose. For the first time, something flickered in Reed's eyes. Not fear exactly, but uncertainty. Elira leaned forward. I walked away from my life with nothing but the clothes on my back and a ledger full of your crimes. I nearly died in the desert. I had every reason to give up, to let you keep ruining lives while I hid somewhere safe. But I didn't. And do you know why? Reed didn't answer. Because women like me, the ones you victimized and silenced and traumatized, we're done being afraid. We're done letting men like you walk away clean while we carry the scars. Her voice was steady, cold. You think your father's money will save you. You think the system will protect you, but the system is already failing. People are listening. Families are speaking. And every day you remain free is another day of evidence piling up against you. Reed's jaw tightened. Is that a threat? It's a promise. She stood, leaving the portfolio on the table. Keep the documents. I have copies. Dozens of them. And every newspaper, every courthouse, every church in 100 miles is going to get one. Your father can't buy them all, and eventually you'll run out of places to hide. Elira walked to the door, then paused and looked back. You asked what I want, she said. I want you to feel what your victims felt. Powerless, afraid, alone. I want you to know that no matter where you run, someone will be watching. Someone will know what you are. Reed's face had gone pale. Sleep well, Mr. Reed. Elira walked out into the night, leaving the door open behind her. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from satisfaction. She'd looked him in the eye and seen exactly what she wanted to see. He was afraid. Rowan was pacing when Elira returned. He stopped mid-stride when she walked through the door, his eyes scanning her for injuries. You're late, he said. By 10 minutes. 10 minutes is enough time to get shot. He exhaled slowly. What happened? Elira sat down heavily, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving her hollow. I told him it was over. I made sure he knew we had everything, that there was nowhere left to hide. How'd he take it? Like a man realizing his luck just ran out. She looked up at Rowan. He's scared. Not enough to confess, but enough to make mistakes. Scared men do stupid things. That's what worries me. Rowan was right to worry. The next morning brought proof. Elira woke to shouting in the street. She threw on her coat and rushed outside to find Mrs. Talbot, arguing with 2 men on the front steps. One of them was holding an official-looking document. What's going on? Elira asked. Mrs. Talbot turned, her face flushed with anger. These gentlemen claim you and your brother owe money to the boarding house. They say there's a lien against your rooms. That's impossible. We paid in advance. The man with the document smiled thinly. There seems to be some confusion regarding your payment. Until it's resolved, I'm afraid you'll need to vacate the premises immediately. Let me see that. Rowan appeared behind Elira, still pulling on his shirt. He snatched the document and read it quickly. This is horseshit. We have receipts. If you'd like to dispute the claim, you're welcome to file with the county clerk. In the meantime, you can go to hell, Mrs. Talbot interrupted. These folks paid me fair and square. I don't know what game you're playing, but I won't have it on my property. The man's smile vanished. Mrs. Talbot, I'd advise you not to interfere with official business. The lien is legal and binding. If these individuals refuse to leave, we're authorized to remove them by force. Authorized by who? Rowan's voice was dangerously quiet. The county sheriff's office, of course. Elira felt cold settle into her bones. This was Gerald Reed's doing, using legal machinery to harass them, tie them up in bureaucracy, make their lives difficult enough that they'd give up and leave town. It was exactly the kind of calculated cruelty powerful men excelled at. Mrs. Talbot looked between the men and Alira, clearly torn. She was a widow trying to run a business. Fighting the sheriff's office could ruin her. "It's all right," Alira said quietly. "We'll go." "But it's fine, Mrs. Talbot. You've been very kind to us. We don't want to cause you trouble." They packed quickly, throwing their belongings into saddlebags. By mid-morning, they were standing in the street with their horses, homeless. "Where do we go now?" Alira asked. Rowan scanned the town, thinking. "There's a stable on the south edge. Owner's name is Marcus Webb. Former Army, doesn't care much for authority. We can board the horses there and see if he'll let us sleep in the loft. And if he won't, then we camp outside town and ride in each day. Either way, we're not leaving." Marcus Webb turned out to be exactly what Rowan described. A grizzled man in his 50s with a limp and a suspicious nature. He listened to their story while cleaning tack, his expression unreadable. "So you're the ones stirring up trouble about the Reed boy," Marcus said finally. "We're the ones telling the truth," Elira corrected. Marcus grunted. "Truth's a dangerous thing in a town like this. Powerful people don't like being exposed." He set down the tack and looked at them directly. "I knew a girl once. Sweet kid, about 14. Reed took a shine to her when he first came to town. 2 months later, she tried to drown herself in the creek. Survived, but she's never been right since. Won't talk, won't leave her house." Alira's chest tightened. "What was her name?" "Doesn't matter. Her family moved away last month. Couldn't stand the shame." Marcus's jaw worked. "But I remember, and I've got a long memory for men who hurt children. Will you help us?" "Help you do what?" "Take down Gerald Reed? He owns half this county. Sheriff's in his pocket, mayor too. You really think you can beat that?" "We have to try." Marcus studied them both, then nodded slowly. "All right, you can stay in the loft, no charge. But you pull your weight, feed the horses, muck the stalls, keep the place clean. And if anyone asks, you're paying customers. I don't need Reed's people burning down my stable." "Deal," Rowan said. They settled into the loft that afternoon. It wasn't much. Hay bales for beds, a single lantern, cold seeping through the walls. But it was shelter. Alira lay in the hay that night, staring at the dark ceiling, and wondered how much lower they'd have to sink before this was over. The answer came faster than expected. 2 days later, Thomas Whitmore sent word that his sister had died. Agnes passed quietly in her sleep, her brother holding her hand. The funeral was scheduled for the following afternoon. Alira attended, standing at the back of the church while a handful of mourners paid their respects. Thomas spoke briefly, his voice breaking as he described his sister's dedication to education, her kindness, her courage. When he mentioned that Agnes had spent her final days trying to protect children from harm, several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. After the service, Thomas approached Alira. "She wanted you to have this," he said, handing her a sealed envelope. "She wrote it the day before she died. Said it was important you read it." Alira took the envelope and waited until she was back at the stable to open it. Inside was a letter in shaky handwriting. "Miss Vane, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I wish I had more time to help you, but cancer doesn't negotiate. I want you to know that what you're doing matters. I spent my last years consumed by regret that I didn't fight harder, didn't speak louder, didn't do more to stop Reed when I had the chance. Don't let that be your legacy. There's something I didn't tell you. Gerald Reed keeps a private office in his manufacturing building on the east side of town. His financial records are there, everything he doesn't want the public to see. If you can get access to those records, you'll find proof of every payment he made to cover for his son. But be careful. Gerald is ruthless, and he'll destroy anyone who threatens him. You have fire in you. Use it wisely. Agnes Whitmore." Alira read the letter twice, then handed it to Rowan. "She wants us to break into Gerald Reed's office," Rowan said after reading. "Yes." "That's insane. We're talking about breaking and entering, possibly theft. If we get caught, we go to jail. If we don't get the records, Reed walks free and does this to more children." Alira met his eyes. "I'm going. You don't have to." Rowan crumpled the letter in his fist. "You know I'm going." They spent the next day planning. Marcus, surprisingly, offered tactical advice. Turned out his time in the army had included a few clandestine operations he wasn't eager to discuss in detail. He sketched the layout of the manufacturing building, marked guard positions, noted patrol schedules. Best time to go is between 2 and 3 in the morning, Marcus said. Guards get lazy around then. They'll be cold, tired, ready for their shift to end. You move fast, get in, get what you need, and get out before anyone notices. How do we get past the locks? Alira asked. Marcus grinned and produced a small leather case. Inside were various picks and tools. Army taught me a few things. I'll show you the basics, but don't expect miracles. If the locks are too complex, you'll need another way in. They practiced on the stable doors until Alira could work a simple lock in under 2 minutes. Anything more complicated would have to be Rowan's job. His hands were steadier, his patience greater. The night they chose was cold and moonless. They dressed in dark clothes and left the stable at 1:30, moving through shadows toward the manufacturing district. The streets were empty, most of Milford Springs asleep. A few windows showed lamplight, but no one was out. Gerald Reed's building was a 3-story brick structure with barred windows and a loading dock. A single guard stood at the main entrance, smoking and stamping his feet against the cold. Rowan and Alira circled to the back where Marcus had indicated a service entrance with a simpler lock. Rowan knelt by the door and went to work, while Alira kept watch. The street behind them remained empty. Minutes ticked by. Alira's nerves stretched tighter with each passing second. "Got it," Rowan whispered. The lock clicked. The door swung open. They slipped inside and closed the door behind them. The interior was dark, smelling of machine oil and sawdust. Moonlight filtered through high windows, casting faint shadows. They moved carefully, following the route Marcus had described, through the main floor, up the back stairs to the 3rd floor, where Gerald kept his private office. The office door was locked with something more substantial than the service entrance. Rowan worked on it for 5 minutes before shaking his head. "I can't get it. Need something to pry it open." Alira looked around. A crowbar leaned against the wall near a maintenance closet. She retrieved it and handed it to Rowan. He wedged it into the doorframe and pulled. The wood splintered with a crack that sounded deafening in the silence. They both froze, listening. Nothing. No shouts, no footsteps. Rowan pulled again. The lock gave way, and the door swung open. The office was exactly what Alira expected. Expensive furniture, bookshelves lined with ledgers and files, a massive desk dominating the center. They went to work immediately, Rowan searching the desk while Alira checked the filing cabinets. The first cabinet was locked. Alira used the crowbar, not caring any more about subtlety. The wood split, and she pulled the drawer open. Files. Dozens of them, organized by year. She pulled out the most recent ones and started flipping through. Contracts, invoices, correspondence, all legitimate business. She kept searching. "Found something," Rowan said. Alira joined him at the desk. He'd discovered a hidden compartment in the bottom drawer, shallow but large enough for a single ledger. The ledger was smaller than Alira's, bound in black leather, and when she opened it, her breath caught. Payments. Page after page of payments, dated and annotated. But these weren't business transactions. These were bribes, payoffs, hush money. And the recipient names matched the ones in Alira's ledger from Ashton Flats, families Silas had victimized, officials who'd covered for him. "This is it," Alira whispered. "This proves Gerald knew everything." She was about to close the ledger when she noticed entries from other towns, other names she didn't recognize. Silas Reed's crimes went back further than she'd realized, years further, town after town, victim after victim, all of it documented in his father's careful hand. "There's more," Rowan said, pulling papers from the compartment. "Letters, from Silas to his father, confessions, basically. He's describing what he did, asking for money to fix it." Alira read one of the letters. Silas's handwriting was neat, almost casual, as he described assaulting a 13-year-old student and then discussed how much it would cost to silence her family. The tone was businesslike, devoid of remorse. He could have been discussing the weather. Rage burned through Alira, so intense she felt dizzy. "Take everything," she said. "Every document, every letter, every piece of evidence in this office. We burn his entire world down." They stuffed papers into a bag Rowan had brought. The black ledger went in carefully, wrapped in cloth. They were almost finished when Alira heard it, footsteps on the stairs. Someone's coming, she hissed. Rowan grabbed the bag. Window, now! They ran to the window and threw it open. 3 stories up, no fire escape, just a narrow ledge and a drain pipe. The footsteps were getting closer, accompanied by voices. Rowan went first, slipping through the window and onto the ledge. He tested the drain pipe. It held. He started climbing down. Elira followed, her heart hammering. The ledge was barely wide enough for her boots. Don't look down, she told herself. Just move. The office door burst open behind her. Hey, someone's in here! Elira swung onto the drain pipe and slid down, her hands burning from the friction. She dropped the last 6 feet and landed hard, her ankle twisting. Rowan caught her arm, steadying her. Run! They sprinted through the alley, the bag of documents clutched tight. Behind them, shouts erupted. A whistle blew. More voices joined the pursuit. Elira's ankle screamed with each step, but she didn't slow down. They turned a corner, then another, weaving through the dark streets. The shouts faded but didn't disappear. They kept running until they reached the stable. Marcus was waiting, the back door open. Inside, quick! They stumbled in, gasping. Marcus shut the door and barred it. They saw us, Elira panted. They know someone broke in. But they didn't see your faces? No, too dark. Then you've got time, but not much. They'll search the town come morning. Marcus looked at the bag. That better be worth it. It is. They spent the rest of the night in the loft, going through the documents by lantern light. The evidence was even more damning than Elira had hoped. Gerald Reed hadn't just enabled his son. He'd orchestrated the cover-ups, selected the victims' families based on their vulnerability, and maintained detailed records of every transaction. It was methodical, calculated, evil. He's been doing this for 12 years, Rowan said, reading through the ledger. 12 years of moving Silas from town to town, paying off families, destroying evidence, and he kept records of all of it. Why would he keep records? Elira wondered aloud. Insurance, maybe? Or blackmail? If Silas ever tried to turn on him, Gerald would have proof of his son's crimes. Rowan shook his head. Doesn't matter. What matters is we have it now. At dawn, they heard horses in the street. Through a crack in the stable wall, Elira watched Sheriff Cutler and 6 deputies spread out through town. They were searching buildings, questioning people. It wouldn't be long before they reached the stable. We need to move these documents somewhere safe, Elira said. If they find them here, it's over. Where? Elira thought fast. The church. Thomas Whitmore's church. He'll hide them for us. Marcus agreed to smuggle the documents out in a cart of horse feed he was delivering to a farm on the edge of town. From there, Rowan would take them to Thomas. Elira would stay at the stable, acting as a decoy if the deputies searched the place. The plan worked. Marcus left at mid-morning, his cart loaded with feed and hidden documents. An hour later, the deputies arrived at the stable. We're looking for 2 people who broke into the Reed manufacturing building last night, Sheriff Cutler said, his eyes scanning the stable interior. You seen anything unusual? Marcus spat tobacco juice. I see lots of unusual. You'll have to be more specific. Man and a woman, strangers in town, probably staying somewhere cheap. Had 2 folks staying in the loft, paid customers, but they left this morning, said they were heading east. Cutler's eyes narrowed. Let me see the loft. Marcus shrugged and led him up. Elira held her breath, hidden in an empty horse stall. She heard the deputies moving around above her, boots creaking on the floorboards. They were searching thoroughly. After 10 minutes, they came back down. If those folks come back, you let me know immediately, Cutler said. Sure thing, Sheriff. The deputies left. Elira waited another hour before emerging from her hiding spot. Her whole body was shaking. That was close, Marcus said. Too close. By evening, Rowan returned. The documents were safe with Thomas, hidden in the church basement where Gerald Reed would never think to look. Now came the hard part, figuring out how to use them without getting killed. Louisa Hart was released from jail 2 days later, charges dropped after her lawyer threatened a lawsuit over unlawful detention. She emerged furious and more determined than ever. When Elira showed her the documents from Gerald's office, Louisa's eyes lit up. This is everything, Louisa breathed. With this, we bury them both. It's stolen evidence, Elira pointed out. Will it hold up? In court? Maybe not. But I don't need it to hold up in court. I just need it to be true. Louisa started organizing the papers. Public opinion doesn't care about chain of custody. They care about proof. And this, she held up Gerald's ledger, this is proof that destroys any doubt. When can you publish? Tomorrow. Front page. Everything. But that night, the Reed family made their move. Alira was in the stable loft when she heard horses approaching. Too many horses, moving too fast. She looked out and saw at least a dozen riders, some carrying torches. Her stomach dropped. "Rowan," she whispered urgently, "wake up!" He was on his feet instantly, grabbing his rifle. "What is it?" "Company, and they don't look friendly." The riders surrounded the stable. A voice called out, cultured and cold. "Miss Vane, Mr. Mercer, I know you're in there. Come out peacefully, and no one gets hurt." Gerald Reed. Alira recognized his voice from the press conference. "What do we do?" she whispered. Rowan checked his rifle. "We've got one gun and a dozen men outside. If we fight, we die. If we surrender, we die. Maybe. Maybe not." Rowan looked at her. "You trust me? With my life? Then follow my lead." Rowan moved to the loft door and called down. "Mr. Reed, we're coming out. Don't shoot." They descended the ladder slowly, hands visible. Marcus stood near the stable entrance, looking furious but helpless. The riders had him covered. Gerald Reed sat astride a black horse, dressed impeccably despite the late hour. He was a handsome man in his 50s, with Silas's same confident bearing but with harder edges. His eyes were cold as they settled on Alira. "Miss Vane, you've caused me considerable trouble." "Good." A thin smile. "You broke into my property, stole private documents, committed multiple crimes. And you think you've won because you have some papers? Those papers prove you're a criminal, that you protected your son while he destroyed lives. They prove nothing except that you're a thief." Gerald gestured, and two men dismounted, moving toward Alira and Rowan. "I'm a reasonable man. Return my property, leave town tonight, and I'll forget this ever happened. Refuse, and I'll have you both arrested, tried, and imprisoned. Your choice." "We don't have the documents," Rowan said. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not. We moved them. You're welcome to search the stable, but you won't find anything." Gerald's expression darkened. "Where are they?" "Somewhere you'll never reach them, but in about 6 hours, they'll be published in the Milford Gazette for everyone to read." For the first time, Gerald Reed looked genuinely angry. "You're making a serious mistake." "The only mistake was yours," Alira said. "Keeping records of your crimes. Did you really think no one would ever find them?" Gerald stared at her, and Alira saw the calculation behind his eyes. He was weighing options, measuring risks. Finally, he spoke. "Kill them." The words hung in the air. The riders raised their weapons. Alira closed her eyes, waiting for the gunshot. Instead, she heard horses. More horses coming fast from the direction of town. She opened her eyes and saw riders emerging from the darkness. At least 20 of them, maybe more. At the front was Thomas Whitmore, holding a lantern high. "Gerald Reed," Thomas's voice rang out. "Stand down!" Gerald turned, startled. "Thomas, this doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't. These people are under my protection, and unless you want to explain to the whole town why you're threatening them with murder, I suggest you leave." "You're bluffing. You don't have the authority." "Maybe not, but they do." Thomas gestured to the riders behind him. Alira recognized several faces, parents whose children had testified against Silas, business owners who'd read the articles, even a few members of the town council. All armed, all watching Gerald with hostile eyes. The balance of power had shifted. Gerald Reed sat very still on his horse, his face a mask. Then, slowly, he smiled. "This isn't over, Miss Vane." "Yes," Alira said quietly. "It is." Gerald turned his horse and rode away, his men following. They disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind only dust and the lingering smell of torch smoke. Thomas dismounted and approached Alira. "You all right?" "We're alive. That's more than I expected 5 minutes ago." She looked at the crowd behind him. "Thank you. All of you." "Don't thank us yet," Thomas said. "Gerald Reed doesn't make idle threats. You need to stay sharp." But the next morning, when the Milford Gazette published its exposé, everything changed. The headline dominated every conversation in Milford Springs by noon. People stood in clusters on street corners, passing copies of the Gazette back and forth, voices rising in disbelief and anger. The article laid everything bare. Gerald Reed's ledger entries, the letters from Silas describing his crimes, the systematic cover-ups spanning more than a decade. Louisa had printed actual photographs of the documents, making denial impossible. By 2 o'clock, a crowd had gathered outside the Reed manufacturing building. By 3, someone threw the first rock. Alira watched from a safe distance as the situation spiraled. She'd expected anger, but not this. The crowd swelled to over 100 people, parents, workers, townspeople who'd been lied to for months. They wanted blood, or at least accountability, and neither was forthcoming. Sheriff Cutler appeared with his deputies, trying to restore order. But when he attempted to disperse the crowd, someone shouted that he'd been protecting Reed all along. The accusation caught fire. Within minutes, the crowd had turned on Cutler too, demanding his resignation. "This is getting out of hand," Rowan said quietly. He and Alira stood in the shadow of a building across the street, watching the chaos unfold. People are angry. They have a right to be. Angry people do stupid things. Someone's going to get hurt. He was right. Already fistfights were breaking out. Someone smashed a window. The deputies tried to intervene and got shoved back. Cutler drew his gun and fired into the air, the shot cracking across the square. The crowd went silent. "Go home," Cutler's voice shook. "All of you, go home now, or I'll start making arrests." "Arrest Reed first," someone shouted back. "That's not your decision to make." "Then whose is it? The mayor's? He's in Reed's pocket too." The crowd surged forward. Cutler's deputies formed a line, but they were outnumbered 10 to 1. Alira saw the panic in their faces. Then a gunshot rang out from somewhere in the crowd. One of the deputies went down, clutching his leg. Blood spread across the dirt. The crowd scattered, people running in all directions. More shots followed. Who was shooting? Alira couldn't tell. It was chaos, pure and simple. Rowan grabbed her arm. "We need to leave. Now!" They retreated through the alleys, moving away from the violence. Behind them, the sounds of shouting and breaking glass echoed through the streets. By the time they reached the stable, Alira's hands were shaking. "People are going to die over this," she said. "Maybe, but that's not your fault. Isn't it? I started this. I pushed and pushed until everything exploded." Rowan turned her to face him. "You exposed the truth. What people do with that truth is their choice, not yours. You can't control how they react. But I knew this would happen. I knew it would tear the town apart. And you did it anyway because it was right." His voice was firm. "Don't second-guess yourself now." That night, the violence continued. Someone set fire to the Reed manufacturing building. The flames lit up the sky, visible for miles. By the time the volunteer fire brigade arrived, half the structure was engulfed. They managed to save part of it, but Gerald Reed's private office, the one Alira and Rowan had broken into, burned completely. The next morning, 3 more buildings had been vandalized. The mayor's house had its windows smashed. Someone painted "liar" across the front of the sheriff's office. The town council called an emergency meeting to discuss the crisis. Alira wasn't invited, but she went anyway. The council met in the town hall, a drafty building with a leaking roof and worn floorboards. By the time Alira and Rowan arrived, the room was packed with angry citizens demanding action. The council members sat at a long table at the front, looking overwhelmed. Mayor Brennan called for order, banging a gavel that no one paid attention to. Finally, he stood and shouted, "Enough! Everyone sit down and shut up, or we'll clear this room." The crowd settled into a hostile silence. Brennan adjusted his collar. "We're here to address the recent allegations against Silas Reed and his father, Gerald Reed. I want everyone to understand that these are serious accusations that require proper investigation. We cannot—" "Investigation?" A woman stood in the 3rd row. Ruth Morgan, Anna's mother. "We don't need an investigation. The evidence is right there in the newspaper. What we need is arrests." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "Mrs. Morgan, I understand your frustration, but the legal process protected Reed for 12 years. Ruth's voice cracked. "My daughter suffered because you people looked the other way. So did a dozen other girls. Don't talk to me about process." Brennan's face flushed. "We didn't know. You didn't want to know." There's a difference. The crowd erupted in support. Brennan banged the gavel again, but it was useless. The room had turned into a shouting match, everyone talking over everyone else. Then a voice cut through the chaos. "I'd like to speak." Elira turned. Silas Reed stood in the doorway, flanked by two lawyers. He looked thinner than before, his face drawn, but his posture remained defiant. The room went dead silent. "I have a right to address my accusers," Silas said, walking to the front of the room. His lawyers tried to stop him, but he waved them off. "These people want answers. I'll give them answers." Mayor Brennan looked like he wanted to object, but couldn't find the words. Silas turned to face the crowd. "I've been accused of terrible things," Silas began. His voice was calm, measured. "Things I vehemently deny. The documents published in the newspaper are taken out of context, twisted to make me appear guilty of crimes I never committed. My father's ledger entries were business transactions, nothing more. The letters were confessions." Elira's voice rang out. She stood, every eye in the room turning to her. "Those letters were confessions. You described what you did to those girls in explicit detail. You asked your father for money to cover it up. Don't stand there and lie." Silas's jaw tightened. "And who are you to make such accusations? A disgraced teacher from a failed school who carried a grudge?" "I carried evidence. Evidence you thought was buried. Evidence your father tried to hide." Elira walked toward the front, her heart pounding. "You want to deny it? Fine. But let me ask you this. If you're innocent, why did your father pay off so many families? Why did he keep detailed records of every bribe? Why did you move from town to town, always one step ahead of the complaints?" "I moved for career opportunities." "You moved because you were chased out. Every time the truth got too close, your father bought you a fresh start." Elira stopped a few feet from him. "You're not a victim, Mr. Reed. You're a predator, and everyone in this room knows it now." Silas's mask slipped. For just a moment, Elira saw rage in his eyes, pure, undiluted fury. Then he recovered, smoothing his expression back into calm denial. "You're entitled to your opinion, Miss Vane, but opinions aren't facts, and slander isn't justice. I'll clear my name in a court of law, where evidence actually matters." "Then let's go to court," Elira said. "Let's put everything under oath. Let's see how well your lies hold up when families testify, when your victims describe what you did, when forensic accountants trace every dollar your father spent covering for you." Silas opened his mouth, then closed it. His lawyers stepped forward. "Our client has said enough," one of them announced. "Any further discussion should happen through proper legal channels." They escorted Silas out. The crowd let them pass, but the silence was heavy with condemnation. After they left, the room erupted again, this time with calls for prosecution, for justice, for Reed to be arrested immediately. Mayor Brennan tried to restore order, but he'd lost the room. Finally, he adjourned the meeting and fled. Outside, Thomas Whitmore found Elira. "That took courage," he said, confronting him in front of everyone. "It needed to be said." "Maybe. But you made an enemy today. Silas won't forget this." "I'm counting on it." The next 48 hours brought a cascade of consequences. Sheriff Cutler resigned, unable to face the accusations that he'd been complicit in protecting Reed. The deputy who'd been shot in the riot survived, but announced he was leaving law enforcement. Mayor Brennan called for an independent investigation into the Reed family's activities, but by then, it was too late. The damage to his reputation was done. Gerald Reed, meanwhile, disappeared. His house stood empty. His business shuttered. Rumors spread that he'd fled east to avoid prosecution, that he'd liquidated assets and gone into hiding. No one knew for certain, but his absence felt like an admission of guilt. Silas, however, stayed. That surprised Elira. She'd expected him to run with his father. Instead, he remained in his house adjacent to the school, doors locked, curtains drawn. His lawyers issued statements proclaiming his innocence while simultaneously filing motions to suppress evidence and delay any potential trial. "He's not running because he thinks he can still win," Rowan said one evening. They were in the stable loft reviewing the latest developments. "His lawyers are good. They're going to argue that the evidence was obtained illegally, that it's inadmissible, that their client's rights were violated." Will it work? In court? Maybe. But the court of public opinion has already convicted him. That was true. Businesses that had employed Reed family investments cut ties. The school board terminated Silas's contract. Parents who'd once praised him now crossed the street to avoid him. He'd become a pariah overnight. But exile wasn't enough for Elira. She wanted accountability, legal and binding. She wanted Reed in prison, not just socially shunned. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A woman arrived in Milford Springs 3 weeks after the expose, a stranger in her 40s with tired eyes and a worn traveling bag. She went straight to the Gazette office and asked for Louisa Hart. Louisa brought her to the stable that evening. "This is Margaret Caldwell," Louisa said. "She read about the Reed case in a newspaper 2 states over. She has a story you need to hear." Margaret sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When she spoke, her voice was steady but pained. 15 years ago, I was a student in a small town called Riverside. Silas Reed was my teacher. I was 13. She paused, gathering strength. He assaulted me. When I told my parents, they went to the school board. Reed's father showed up with lawyers and money. My family was poor, we couldn't fight them. They made us sign papers saying we wouldn't pursue the matter, paid us $500, and told us to move on. Elira felt cold settle into her chest. "Did you keep the papers?" "Yes. Everything. I've carried them for 15 years, waiting for a chance to use them." Margaret pulled documents from her bag. "When I read that Reed was finally being exposed, I knew it was time. I want to testify. I want to make sure he can't hurt anyone else." Louisa took the documents carefully. "This is exactly what we need. Physical proof of a payoff, a signed agreement acknowledging the complaint. This predates everything in Gerald's ledger." "Will it help convict him?" Margaret asked. "It'll help build a pattern, show that this behavior goes back further than anyone realized." Louisa looked at Elira. "With Margaret's testimony and the documents we already have, we can push the district attorney to file charges." But the district attorney, a man named Howard Finch, was reluctant. When Elira and Louisa met with him, he expressed concerns about the evidence. "Most of this was obtained through illegal means," Finch said, tapping Gerald's ledger. "Breaking and entering, theft. A good defense attorney will get it thrown out." "What about Margaret Caldwell's testimony?" Elira pressed. "She has documentation that predates everything we found." "That helps. But one victim from 15 years ago isn't enough to convict on current charges. We need more. There are families here willing to testify, families who've been influenced by media coverage. Defense will argue they're jumping on a bandwagon, motivated by money or attention." Finch leaned back in his chair. "Look, I want to prosecute Reed as much as you do, but I need a case that won't fall apart in court. Right now, I don't have that." Elira felt frustration boiling over. "So he just walks free?" "I didn't say that. I said I need more evidence, solid, legally obtained evidence. Can you give me that?" Elira couldn't answer. That night, she sat in the stable loft, staring at the documents spread before her. Everything they'd fought for, all the risks they'd taken, and it still might not be enough. The system was designed to protect men like Reed, to create obstacles and technicalities that shielded the guilty. "I don't know what else to do," she admitted to Rowan. "We've exposed him, ruined his reputation, destroyed his father's business, but none of that puts him in prison. Maybe prison isn't the only form of justice. It's the only form that matters." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "Is it? You wanted Reed to answer for his crimes, to feel powerless, afraid, alone. That's what you told him. He's experiencing all of that now. He can't work, can't show his face, can't live without people knowing what he is. Isn't that a kind of justice? It's not enough." "Maybe it has to be." Elira wanted to argue, but exhaustion weighed on her. She'd been fighting for months, first to survive the desert, then to expose Reed, then to see him prosecuted. The battle had consumed her, and she wasn't sure she had anything left. The resolution came not with a dramatic trial, but with a quiet morning 2 weeks later. Elira was at the Gazette office, helping Louisa sort through letters from other victims who'd come forward, when Thomas Whitmore arrived with news. "Reed's gone," Thomas said. "Left town last night. Someone saw him boarding the eastbound train with 2 suitcases." Elira's stomach dropped. "He ran." "Looks that way. His house is empty. No note, no forwarding address. We have to find him. If he disappears, he won't disappear completely," Louisa interrupted. "Men like Reed can't vanish. They leave trails, financial records, forwarding addresses, connections. We'll find him eventually." But Elira knew the truth. Reed was slipping away, escaping consequences once again. All their work, and he'd still managed to evade justice. That afternoon, a letter arrived at the Gazette office. It was addressed to Alira. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single page in Silas Reed's handwriting. Miss Vane, you've won. I hope that brings you satisfaction. My life here is destroyed, my reputation ruined, my career finished. I'll spend the rest of my days looking over my shoulder, wondering when someone like you will find me again. You wanted me to feel powerless. Mission accomplished. But don't mistake exile for justice. I'm still free. I'll go somewhere new, start over, become someone else. You can't watch me forever. And eventually, people forget. Stories fade. I'll survive this, just like I've survived everything else. You fought hard. But men like me always land on our feet. S.R. Alira read the letter 3 times, rage building with each pass. He was right. He'd escaped. All the exposure, all the evidence, and he'd simply walked away. She showed the letter to Rowan. "Arrogant bastard," Rowan muttered. "He's taunting you. He's telling the truth. He's going to start over somewhere else and we can't stop him." "Yes, we can." Rowan took the letter. "He thinks he's won because he got on a train, but that letter is a confession. He's admitting he did everything we accused him of. He's just framing it as inevitable." "So what do? We publish it. We send copies to every newspaper, every school board, every sheriff's office within 500 miles. We make sure that wherever Reed goes, this letter follows him. We make sure he can never hide again." Louisa agreed immediately. "I'll run it tomorrow, and I'll send it to every editor I know. Reed thinks distance will protect him, but we'll make distance irrelevant." The letter ran in the Gazette the next day, alongside a detailed physical description of Silas Reed and a request for anyone who encountered him to contact authorities. Other newspapers picked up the story. Within a week, Reed's letter and face were circulating across multiple territories. 2 weeks later, word came that Reed had been spotted in a town 300 miles east. He'd tried to secure a teaching position using a false name. Someone recognized him from the newspaper descriptions and alerted the local sheriff. Reed fled before he could be arrested, but the pattern held. Every time he surfaced, someone recognized him, and he had to run again. He'd become a fugitive not from the law exactly, but from his own reputation. "It's not prison," Alira said one evening, reading the latest report. "But it's something." "It's him living the rest of his life looking over his shoulder," Rowan replied, "unable to hurt anyone else because everyone knows what he is. That's a different kind of cage." Alira wanted to feel satisfied, but mostly she felt tired. The victory was hollow. Reed was suffering, yes, but he was still free. And while he'd been stopped in Milford Springs, how many other men like him were operating elsewhere, protected by the same systems that had shielded Reed for so long? The thought haunted her. As spring turned to summer, life in Milford Springs slowly returned to normal. The burned building was rebuilt. A new sheriff was elected, a woman named Caroline Marsh who promised transparency and accountability. The school board hired a new schoolmaster, a quiet man with impeccable references who endured intense scrutiny before being approved. The families who testified against Reed began healing, though it was slow work. Sarah Pritchard told Alira that Emily was sleeping better, smiling more. Ruth Morgan reported that Anna had started drawing again, something she'd stopped doing after Reed came into her life. Small victories. Not enough, but something. Alira received letters from other towns, women asking for advice, sharing their own stories of abuse and cover-ups, wanting to know how to fight back. She answered each one, offering what guidance she could. But she knew she couldn't be everywhere, couldn't fight every battle. One evening, as she was writing responses, Rowan approached with news from Mercer Ranch. "Tessa sent a letter," he said. "She and Cal are managing fine, but they want to know when we're coming back." Alira set down her pen. She hadn't thought about returning to the ranch in weeks. Milford Springs had consumed her attention so completely that everything else felt distant. "Do you want to go back?" she asked. Rowan sat down across from her. "Eventually, but I'm not in a rush. The ranch will survive without me for a while longer." "What about me? What happens when this is over?" "That's up to you. You're welcome at the ranch for as long as you want, but I suspect you've got other plans." He was right. Alira had been thinking about what came next, about all the letters from women who needed help, about the systems that continued protecting predators even after Reed's exposure. She couldn't fix everything, but maybe she could help more than just this one town. I think I want to keep doing this, Alira said slowly. Not just Reed, but others like him. Women keep writing to me, asking for help. Maybe I can give it. That's dangerous work. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Rowan smiled. Fair point. He paused. You'll need help. Resources, connections, people you can trust. Are you offering? I'm saying the ranch is a good base of operations, and Tessa's been itching to get involved in something bigger than account books. She'd probably volunteer in a heartbeat. Alira felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, but possibility. For the first time in months, she could see a path forward that didn't end with collapse or defeat. I'd like that, she said. The decision to leave Milford Springs came 2 weeks later. The town no longer needed her. The systems were changing slowly, new leadership was in place, and the families were beginning to rebuild. Alira's work here was done. On her last day, she visited the families who'd testified. Sarah Pritchard thanked her with tears in her eyes. Ruth Morgan gave her a quilt Anna had made, each square stitched with careful precision. Thomas Whitmore walked her to the train station, carrying her bag. Agnes would be proud, Thomas said as they waited on the platform. You finished what she started. I just exposed the truth. The hard work of healing, that's on the families. Maybe. But exposure was the first step. Without it, nothing else could happen. He handed her a small wrapped package. This was Agnes's. She wanted you to have it. Alira unwrapped the package. Inside was a leather-bound journal, empty pages waiting to be filled. She kept journals her whole life, Thomas explained. Wrote down everything she learned, everything she saw. She thought you might do the same. Document the fight. Help others learn from it. Alira held the journal carefully. Thank you for everything. Thank you for having the courage to stand up. Not many people do. The train arrived with a blast of steam and grinding metal. Alira boarded, finding a seat by the window. As the train pulled away, she watched Milford Springs recede into the distance, the town where she'd fought her hardest battle and come out scarred but standing. Rowan sat beside her, quiet and steady. You all right? He asked. I think so. Any regrets? Alira thought about that. She'd broken laws, destroyed lives, torn apart a town's social fabric. She'd made enemies who would hate her forever. She'd sacrificed any chance at a quiet, normal life. No, she said finally. No regrets. The train carried them west, back toward Mercer Ranch, back toward whatever came next. Alira opened Agnes's journal and wrote the first entry, documenting everything that had happened in Milford Springs, not as a story, but as a guide. For herself, for others who might need it, for anyone willing to fight when the system failed. She wrote until the light faded, until her hand cramped, until Rowan gently took the pen and told her to rest. Alira closed the journal and looked out the window at the darkening prairie. Somewhere out there, Silas Reed was running, looking over his shoulder, unable to escape his past. Gerald Reed was in hiding, his empire crumbling. The truth was out, spreading like fire through dry grass, impossible to contain or control. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was something. And sometimes, Alira was learning, something was all you could hope for. The ranch appeared on the horizon 3 days later. The familiar wooden fence, the well-maintained buildings, the green grass that seemed impossible in a drought-stricken region. Tessa stood on the porch, Cal beside her, both waving as the wagon approached. Home. The word felt strange in Alira's mind. She'd been homeless for so long, drifting from place to place, that the concept seemed foreign. But watching Tessa's smile, seeing Cal's shy wave, feeling Rowan's steady presence beside her, Alira understood something fundamental had changed. She'd started this journey as a woman fleeing her past, carrying guilt and fear like stones in her pockets. She'd nearly died in the desert, been rescued by strangers, and thrown herself into a battle she had no guarantee of winning. And she'd won. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to make a difference. Enough to prove that silence wasn't the only option when faced with injustice. As the wagon pulled up to the house, Tessa rushed forward. You look terrible, Tessa said, pulling Alira into a hug. Alira laughed despite herself. I feel terrible. Then you're staying put for a while. No arguments. You're going to eat proper meals, sleep in a real bed, and stop trying to save the world for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks might not be enough. Then 3 or 4. However long it takes. Tessa released her and stepped back, studying Elira's face. You did good work out there. We read about it in the papers. The whole territory's talking about what you did. It wasn't just me. No, but you started it. That takes guts. Inside, the house was exactly as Elira remembered. Warm, solid, real. Cal helped carry her bags upstairs to the same room she'd recovered in months ago. It felt like returning to a beginning, a full circle that somehow made sense. That night, over dinner, Elira told them everything. Tessa listened intently, asking sharp questions. Cal said little, but watched with those careful eyes that missed nothing. Rowan filled in details Elira glossed over, making sure the full story came out. When Elira finished, Tessa sat back in her chair. So what now? Tessa asked. You planning to rest on your laurels, or are you going to keep fighting? Keep fighting, Elira said without hesitation. There are too many stories like Reed's, too many places where the system protects predators instead of victims. Figured you'd say that. Tessa exchanged a look with Rowan. We've been talking. If you want to keep doing this work, the ranch can serve as a base. We've got space, resources, connections. And frankly, I'm tired of just managing accounts. I want to be part of something that matters. Elira felt warmth spread through her chest. You'd do that? Someone has to. Might as well be us. Cal spoke up for the first time. I can help too, with research, letters, whatever you need. Elira looked around the table at these people who'd become something more than allies. They'd become family. Not through blood or obligation, but through shared purpose and mutual respect. Thank you, Elira said quietly. All of you. Don't thank us yet, Rowan said with a small smile. This work's going to be dangerous. It's going to make enemies. It's going to cost us. I know. Good. As long as we're all clear on that. They spent the next week setting up what Tessa jokingly called the operation. A corner of the ranch house became an office, filled with files, correspondence, and documents. Letters arrived daily from women across the territory, some asking for help, others offering support, a few sharing their own stories of abuse and survival. Elira answered each one personally. She couldn't help everyone, couldn't fight every battle, but she could offer guidance, share what she'd learned, connect people with resources. Slowly, a network formed, women helping women, sharing information, building collective strength. It wasn't enough to change the system overnight, but it was a start. Summer turned to fall. The drought finally broke, rain falling in sheets across the prairie, soaking into soil that had been dry too long. The land responded, green sprouting where brown had dominated for years. It felt symbolic somehow, like the region was exhaling after holding its breath. One evening, Elira sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in oranges and purples, clouds catching the last light. She held Agnes's journal, now half filled with entries documenting cases, strategies, lessons learned. Rowan joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered her one, then sat in the chair beside her. You thinking about Reed? He asked. Always. Last I heard, he was spotted in Colorado, tried to get work at a mine. Someone recognized him and ran him off. Good. Elira sipped her coffee. He'll keep running. Eventually, he'll run out of places to go. Does that bother you, that he's not in prison? Elira considered. Yes, but I'm learning to accept that justice doesn't always look the way we want it to. Reed's life is destroyed. He'll never teach again, never hold a position of authority, never have the power to hurt children. That's not prison, but it's not freedom either. And his father? Gerald Reed's business collapsed. His political connections dried up. Last I heard, he's living in a boarding house in St. Louis, working as a clerk, from empire builder to anonymous nobody. Elira paused. It's not what I wanted, but it's something. They sat in comfortable silence, watching night settle over the ranch. In the distance, Cal was closing up the barn. Tessa's lamp burned in the office window, working late as always. Do you ever regret it? Rowan asked. Walking across that desert, nearly dying, everything that came after? Elira thought about the woman who'd collapsed at the fence months ago, starving, desperate, carrying a ledger she didn't know what to do with. That woman had been broken by trauma, paralyzed by fear, convinced she was powerless. She wasn't that woman anymore. No, Elira said. I don't regret it, because that walk led me here. To this place, these people, this work. I found something I didn't know I was looking for. What's that? Purpose. And the strength to pursue it, no matter the cost. Rowan nodded. Your teacher back in Ashton Flats, the one who nearly died fighting Reed's system. You think she'd be proud? Elira smiled. That teacher died in the desert. I'm someone else now. Who are you then? She looked out at the land spreading before her, vast and unforgiving but no longer frightening. She thought about the letters waiting inside, the women counting on her, the battles yet to come. Someone who doesn't stay silent anymore, Elira said. Someone who fights. Inside the house, Tessa called that dinner was ready. Rowan stood and offered Elira his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Together they walked inside into warmth and light and the company of people who'd chosen to stand beside her. The ledger that had started everything sat locked in a drawer upstairs, not hidden, but retired. It had served its purpose. Elira didn't need it anymore. The evidence was out in the world now, spreading through newspapers and courthouses and conversations. The truth couldn't be buried again. As she sat down to dinner, surrounded by family she'd chosen rather than inherited, Elira felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the acceptance of it. The understanding that some battles never truly end, they just change shape. And she was ready for whatever came next. The frontier had tried to kill her. Instead, it had forged her into something harder, sharper, stronger. She'd walked into the wilderness broken and emerged whole. Not healed exactly, some wounds never fully close, but functional, capable, dangerous in the ways that mattered. Men like Silas Reed had counted on her silence, on her fear, on the system grinding her down until she gave up. They'd miscalculated badly, because Elira Vane had learned the most important lesson the frontier could teach. Survival wasn't enough. You had to decide what you were surviving for, and once you knew that, once you found your purpose, nothing could stop you. Not drought, not distance, not powerful men with money and influence. Nothing. Outside, the stars emerged one by one, bright against the darkening sky. The wind carried the smell of rain-soaked earth and new growth. Somewhere out there, injustice continued. Predators hid behind respectability. Systems failed the people they were meant to protect. But also out there, women were reading Elira's story, learning from her example, finding courage in her courage, beginning to understand that silence was a choice, not a requirement. The work would continue. The battles would keep coming. But tonight, in this moment, Elira allowed herself to simply exist, to eat dinner with people she loved, to laugh at Tessa's dry humor, to watch Cal slowly open up, to feel Rowan's quiet strength beside her. She'd earned this. The peace, the belonging, the sense that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Tomorrow, there would be more letters to answer, more cases to investigate, more fights to wage. But tonight, she rested, and that was enough.